I offer my most humble and loving pranams at the lotus feet of our dear Lord Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Om Shri Sai Ram. On behalf of the Sri Sathya Sai Baba Center of Toronto, York, I extend a very warm welcome to each and every one of you tuning in this evening. This weekend we have had some wonderful SSE presentations for Swami's 95th birthday from our Group 1, Group 2, Group 3 and Group 4 girls this morning. This evening, to wrap it up, we have a phenomenal feature presentation for our Group 4 boys. You'll see the tremendous work that these boys have put in over the last several months, as well as all the SSE have put in for so many months. And I'd like to just take a moment to thank the boys, their gurus, and all the parents for all of their hard work in putting these offerings together during such a difficult time. Please enjoy their learning and the journey they'll take us along the theme, My Story is His Story. Thank you, sit back and enjoy the offering. Jai Sai Ram.
Our humble pranams at the divine lotus feet of the Master, Bhagawan Sri Sathya Sai Baba.
Respected elders, youth and children, Om Shri Sai Ram. And welcome to the SSE 95th birthday celebrations.
Thank you all for joining us. Today we will present the Senior Boys 95th birthday gratitude offering.
Today, we will be covering the three spiritual paths that take us to God: Bhakti,
Jnanam,
and Karma.
In a discourse given on November 18, 1995, Swami says, the significance of the three letters in Sai should be understood.
S stands for service.
A stands for adoration,
And I stands for illumination.
These three represent Karma, Bhakti, and Jnana respectively. Sai teaches that all the three concepts are equally important. Sai is a combination of three spiritual paths of action, devotion, and wisdom.
When we hear about these three paths or margams, it's easy to consider them separate from one another. The path of action or Karma Marga, the path of devotion or Bhakti Marga, and finally, the path of wisdom or the Jnana Marga. They are often treated as separate paths to reaching God, but Swami beautifully explained otherwise.
Any good road has three layers: the layer of stones, the layer of gravel, and the layer of asphalt. As Swami says, they're not three different paths, but rather three layers of the same path.
Let's take a look at this apple. It has weight, it has shape, and it has taste. Just like weight, shape, and taste are attributes of the same apple, Karma, Bhakti, and Jnana are attributes of the same journey, the same path that we take to God.
There's another analogy we can use to explain this. Swami says, Jnana Yoga is like college, but Karma Yoga is primary school, and Bhakti Yoga is high school. We can't get to college without getting through elementary school and high school.
We can see here that our early stages involve developing the right habits, doing good actions that we continuously offer to God, which is elementary school.
And then, after graduating from elementary school, we start developing a loving relationship with God. We strive to become closer and closer, and our faith and love for God grows as we become more and more rooted, and that's high school.
Finally, after graduating high school, we end up in college, where we slowly strive to have experiences that prove the idea that I and God may not be so different.
The third analogy that Swami gives is that of a clock. A clock has a seconds hand, which symbolizes Karma Yoga, the minute hand, which is Bhakti Yoga, and the hour hand, which is Jnana Yoga. The seconds hand has to move continuously and in the right direction. That's why Swami says we need to do Sat Karma, which is good actions. And only when we complete one whole circle in Sat Karmas do we get a little bit of Chitta Shuddhi,
which is the minute hand. Chitta Shuddhi is purity of mind. This Chitta Shuddhi, or purity of mind, is very, very important for Bhakti Yoga, which is love for God.
And when this Chitta Shuddhi completes one full circle, Swami says, the hour hand moves a little bit. The hour hand is Jnana Yoga, representing Atma Vishwasa. Atma Vishwasa means self-confidence. And when we speak about the self in self-confidence, that self refers to the Atma, the divinity within us.
So today, our brothers will take you down the path of understanding these three margams with the hope that it provides you clarity on your journey. We've divided ourselves into three groups to take this journey with you. We will explain to you what it means to be on each path and use proofs from the Bhagavad Gita to support our findings. And then we take you down the journey of my story is his story, narrating experiences from Swami's life and our own that highlight these three paths. And finally, we end by explaining to you all how you can progress on these paths. We start our journey by sharing our own insights on the meaning of these three words:
Jnanam,
Bhakti,
and karma. Om
Shri,
Sai Ram.
To be on the path of karma is to do your duty and perform every action without expectation of results, and to understand that everything happens for a reason, even when the results are not what we hope for. One of the most important components of the path of karma is not dwelling on what may seem bad. This means accepting both good and bad, and understanding that although one event may seem good or bad, in the end, every single action that we do and that is done to us will help us in some way. For example, let's say that on your way to work or school one day, you happen to lose your purse. You come home the same day extremely sad, upset, and obviously annoyed. But instead of dwelling on these emotions, imagine if you accepted them and decided to move on. You make a plan to wait at the GO station the next day to see if someone perhaps found your purse. But on the way to the GO station the next day, there's lots of traffic, and you end up having to wait in the cold and the rain. But again, instead of dwelling on this emotion and getting angry, you choose to accept it yet again. As you arrive at the GO station, you see someone walking up to you. The person reaches into their pocket and pulls out your purse. They ask if it's yours, and you gladly accept and thank them for their kind deed. Now, the moral of this story is that sometimes things that may seem bad, which in this case was losing your purse and having to wait in the cold, can result in the greatest of things. You could choose to see this entire situation as bad karma, or instead see this as something that not only fixed your problem of losing a purse, but also changed your way of thinking. Following the path of karma means accepting both good and bad as necessity, and understanding that only the attempt and the efforts are in our control, and that the results are something that we may not yet understand and should definitely not worry about. The path of karma is action-oriented. We are doing work, we make the conscious effort to act. But in acting, we keep Dharma as our star. Dharma leads the way. We must identify and understand the different roles we are all meant to play, and reflect on how to carry out these roles in a dharmic way and in a duty-centric way. In acting, we want to promote a fundamental good, a good that is aligned with the welfare of the world and generations to come. The path of karma involves constant self-reflection to ensure that our actions are always aligned with Dharma. A well-known Sanskrit saying, explained in English, says the following: hunger, rest, fear, and the drive to mate, common are these to beasts and humans. Dharma alone, for the latter, is the additional differentiator. Without Dharma, human behavior is identical to that of beasts.
Thank you, Brother Harshit, for explaining what it means to be on the path of karma. But why should we follow this path? How can one find value in following karma marga?
I find it interesting that you brought that up, Anuram. In chapter 2, verse 47 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna beautifully explains the importance of karma marga. Let's take a moment to listen to the sloka.
कर्मण्येवाधिकारस्ते मा फलेषु कदाचन मा कर्मफलहेतुर्भुः मा ते सङ्गोत्स्वकर्मणि
This shloka describes the idea that you have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you are not entitled to the fruits of your actions. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, nor should you be attached to an action.
We can break down this sloka into 4 parts. Do your duty without concerning yourself with the results. Give up all ownership over the fruits of your actions. Even while carrying out action, give up the sense of doership. And despite all these things, don't be attached to inaction.
Acting without being concerned with the results. What does that mean? I mean, most of us work off this concept of incentives. For me personally, there has to be an incentive in order to motivate myself to work. However, Krishna says that we should act from a place of duty and that we should understand what our duty is in life and carry it out without concentrating on the end results. I think a great concept to keep in mind is Mama Dharma. You have to ask yourself, what is my duty at every point in your life? For example, I am a student, which is my role currently in life. So when I study for a test, I always study in order to pass and excel in the test. However, if the teacher cancels the test, I become disappointed that I wasted my efforts and stressed myself on studying. If I did not concentrate on studying for the test and instead focused on becoming a better student, I wouldn't have been disappointed. It's not easy, but I should concentrate on my role as a student to gain more knowledge instead of concentrating on the end result, which was, in my case, the test.
In point 2, the sloka says that you shouldn't take ownership from the fruit of your action. This means that the amount of effort I put is in my control. However, the result can't be. Why can't they be in my control? This is because there are so many circumstances that can change the outcome of the result. Using your example of being a student, Anuram, I can focus on what's in my control, such as the amount of effort I put into studying, how focused I am, and how much I'm concentrating. However, when it comes to the result, there are several factors that are out of my control. Like if the teacher cancels the test, or there's lots of traffic causing me to miss my test. There's only so much that we can control when it comes to the result. So we should worry about our effort rather than the result.
That was really nicely described, Saish. The shloka goes on saying that even while carrying out action, we should give up the sense of doership. To me, that sounds impossible. I have my own thoughts, and it feels like I control my own body when I am doing an action. So how can I give up doership? Well, the Bhagavad Gita describes that our senses, mind, and intellect are inert, unable to do action, but it is God that energizes them with His power and allows us to act of our own will. Only with the help of the power that we receive from God are we able to work. I think a great example of this is kitchen tongs. We could not say that the tongs did the work, but it is the hand that does the work. Similarly, God supplies ourselves with the power to perform action, and without it, we can do nothing. Keeping this in mind, we must give up the sense of doership, remembering that it is God who gives us our power, and we use that power to perform all our actions.
Towards the end of the sloka, it describes that despite all of these things, a person should not be attached to inaction. Now, what exactly does this mean? The whole sloka explains that we should do our action without looking for a result. But a person may ask, if I don't receive the fruits of my action, why should I act at all? Truly, there's no such thing as non-action. Speaking is an action, breathing is an action, digestion is an action, thinking is an action, and sleeping is an action. So as conscious beings, we are acting whether we like it or not. The Gita describes that since we are always acting, we should act out of a sense of duty. Throughout our lives, all of us have different roles to play. So we should understand and identify each of our roles and act out of a sense of duty.
Those were some really great points, Saish. But ultimately, why should we follow the path of karma? I think that overall, karma margam allows you to focus on doing your duty. And in doing so, your actions become aligned with what is fundamentally good. And you begin to do what is good for all of humanity and the generations that are to come.
Exactly, Anuram. If I'm giving up all sense of doership and I'm not affected by the results, then I don't have to worry about what's in it for me. Mother Nature is the perfect example of this. And I also recall Shabri Devi, who did her duty her entire life, regardless of the outcome.
Karma margam is a path that we can easily understand because it is so tangible and experiential, and it just requires you to continue living your life while refining your thinking to ensure that you are aligned with your dharma. One must decide what their dharma is and act upon it.
And who better to follow as an example than Swami himself? Swami is the epitome of dharmic action and duty-centric living.
In describing what it means to be on the path of bhakti, I feel it is most easy to understand with this story. I'd like to share a story with you all about a young devotee named Krishna Dasa. There once was a very special temple for Lord Krishna. This temple was special because the priest of this temple was able to communicate with Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna would appear in front of this priest, and the priest would speak to him. The priest would tell him about the problems of many people, the joys of these people, and the sorrows of these people. As all of you would have imagined, this temple would be packed with people. It was always so busy because everyone came to fulfill their wishes, asking for things from Lord Krishna. In this temple, there was also one boy named Krishna Dasa. From the early morning till the end of the day, he would sit in this temple, crying for something, but no one knew what it was. This happened so often that the priest couldn't take seeing this boy in such a state. So the next time Lord Krishna appeared before him, even before offering anything, he spoke out to Krishna, saying, "Lord, this is so unfair." Krishna asked, "What's going on? What happened to you today?" The priest said, "Lord, Krishna Dasa has been sitting in this temple for an entire year now. He's been crying for something. Why don't you ask him what he wants?" To this, Krishna smiles and says to the priest, "Okay, go and ask that boy. Does he actually want me to respond to him? The priest is surprised. He seeks out young Krishnadasa. The priest approaches Krishnadasa as he is crying and says to him, Krishnadasa, I see you crying here every day. Please tell me what you want. Don't you want Krishna to fulfill your wish? And to this, Krishnadasa looks at the priest and says, my heart absolutely wishes something very special. But whether it should be granted or not, it is Krishna's wish. The priest says, No, tell me. Don't you want him to grant your wish? To this, Krishnadasa says, should my desire be granted, it is Krishna's wish. And so the priest goes back to tell Lord Krishna what had happened. And when he does, Krishna just smiles. He begins to dance in the temple. The priest is stunned. He's never seen Krishna dance like this. He says, Lord, what is happening? Why are you so happy? I knew it. My Krishna Dasa would say this. That is why I'm so happy. And then Krishna says, Oh priest, you worship me and you talk to me every day. But don't you understand what is happening? For all of you, I'm the reason for your existence. You seek me knowing that even if the whole world lets go of you, that I will not leave you. You share your joys with me, you share your sorrows with me, you have firm faith in me, and you know that however bad you may be, I will not let go of you. My priest, I also need someone like that in my life. And you know what? Even if I do anything to Krishna Dasa, he will not let go of me. My faith in him is complete. Whatever I may do to him, he will always be happy with me. He will always respond to me. And that's why, my dear priest, if you all tear open your hearts, you will see me there. But if you tear open my heart, you will see Krishna Dasa there. That is a true bhakta. This is what it means to be on the path of bhakti. As all of you would have seen in this story, Krishna Dasa desires something. Similar to Krishna Dasa, we all have desires. But when it comes to his prayer being answered, he left it up to Lord Krishna. He truly believed that everything Krishna did was for his own good. Most of us probably wouldn't think like that. The only way someone can believe that everything God does is for their own good is if they've developed a strong relationship or bond with God. But how do we do that? We develop a relationship with God like we would with anyone. We take an interest into things we think will make God happy. We start to have more and more experiences where we see God's hand in our lives. And eventually, every moment of our existence becomes one with Him. This is exactly what devotees like Mirabai and Krishna Dasa have experienced. The person on the path of bhakti will actively look for opportunities to love God more and have more experiences of loving God. This is what it means to be on the path of bhakti.
Thank you so much, Om, for explaining that for us. When we speak about the idea of why one should be on the path of bhakti, we should first understand what the benefit is in developing a relationship with God.
Interesting that you say that, Manan. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 12, verses 1 through 5, Krishna beautifully describes to Arjuna the benefit of developing a relationship with the manifested God. Arjuna inquired, between those who are steadfastly devoted to your personal form and those who worship the imperishable formless Brahman, who do you consider to be more perfect in yoga? Then Krishna replied, those who bring me to their minds in thoughts, words, and actions, while engaged in my devotion at all times, I consider them to be the best yogis. But those who worship the formless aspect of the absolute truth, the imperishable, the indefinable, the unmanifest, the all-pervading, the unthinking, the unchanging, the eternal, and the immovable, by being in control of their senses and being unperturbed in all situations, such persons engaged in the welfare of all beings surely will attain me. Much greater is the struggle of those whose mind is attached to the unmanifest, worship of the unmanifest is exceedingly difficult for embodied beings.
I want to highlight that last point. Much greater is the struggle of whose mind is attached to the unmanifested. Worship of the unmanifested is exceedingly difficult for embodied beings. Krishna goes on to say, "But those who offer up all their actions to me, regarding me as a supreme goal, worshipping me and meditating on me with exclusive devotion, I swiftly deliver them, the ocean of birth and death, for their consciousness and vision is united with me."
That's really interesting, Manan. And I was also wondering why Krishna described worshipping a manifested physical God as a much more easier process. And I think it's because a physical God is much more relatable to us than an unmanifested God.
I absolutely agree. A manifested God like Swami, Rama, or Krishna is tangible. We can perceive them through our senses, so they automatically become more relatable, like my own family members or friends. But when I talk about God as unmanifested, I can use his description of energy, consciousness, or Atma. But it becomes so much harder to relate those concepts because they're not perceivable through my senses. I can't touch or smell the unmanifested God. The unmanifested God is attributeless and without characteristics. When thinking about Swami or my mom, for instance, I can physically perceive them, and so it's easier to see their influence in my life. And that relationship automatically becomes more relatable.
Exactly, Manan. And the more relatable God is to us, the easier it is to develop a relationship. And that is what this path of bhakti is all about. It's about seeing God's hands in our life more and actively identifying the gifts we receive every day. The more we practice gratitude and see God's hands in our life, the easier it is to love God and develop a relationship with God.
Very true. We see countless devotees that have helped develop a relationship with God by loving God more and more, like the Gopikas with Krishna, or even Sai Gita with Swami. The path of bhakti is just loving God more and more. I think that self-realization is a byproduct by a devotee on the path of bhakti. For such a devotee, their only desire is loving God more and more.
Based on understanding what jnanam is, being on the path of jnanam is to constantly ask and self-reflect why you think in a certain way, who you are, and eventually reach a conclusion that your self-identity is the same as others, and there is no difference between you, others, and God. In addition to this, being on the path of jnanam results in striving to have experiences which help us understand that we are not different from the God we pray to. The way we gain this knowledge is through two methods, paravidya and aparavidya. Aparavidya is the information or knowledge that we gain through our perception and senses. Having this knowledge allows us to understand the circumstances of individuals and events that occur around ourselves, understand why they feel in a certain way, and enable us to apply that knowledge to formulate our reactions and consecutive actions. Paravidya, in literal terms, is what is it that is beyond this worldly knowledge. It is a knowledge you gain beyond your senses in terms of going towards yourself and asking who you are and understanding the idea that you and God are no different. In reference to what Swami's teachings state, when he says the only difference between you and I is that I know I am God whereas you don't, it means he has understood this paravidya. Having this paravidya is vital in reaching the state of all-encompassing awareness. At a certain stage in life, the person on this path of jnanam is expected to reach that state and get to know what it is by true experience. One such person is a man by the name of Jack Sisk. Although he did not permanently reach that state of being realized, he was one of a few who had a glimpse of it, which is known as samadhi. Jack Sisk was an ordinary kid who was like most of us, where he found the concept of realization interesting when he heard it, but could not really grasp the understanding of what it truly meant and what it was. On a vacation at the beach, with nothing else to do, he heard some people chanting Om, and he sat down to join them. While chanting Om, he eventually had an experience of transcendental knowing, and where he heard planets and cosmos chanting Om as well, and eventually just consciousness being present. This experience of having an all-encompassing awareness that is not limited by body or state is what it's like to be realized. This is what it means to be on the path of jnana.
Thank you, Brother Yadavan, for your insight on what it means to be on this path of jnana. But why should we take such a marga? Through this road, we can obtain eternal bliss. Knowledge is the foundation of self-realization and becoming the best version of yourself, because regardless of naturally given tendencies we're gifted with at birth, if you don't make a conscious effort to understand who you truly are, your ability to flourish as a person will diminish.
Thanks, Janan. I completely agree with you on that. In fact, Krishna beautifully describes something very similar in the Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 7, verses 4 to 7, Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, space, mind, intelligence, and false ego. These are the 8 different elements that constitute my material nature. However, you should know that there is another nature superior to this inferior nature. It is a conscious potency that consists of all the living beings and maintains this universe. Try to understand that all beings are manifest from these 2 sources and that I am the cause of the creation and annihilation of the entire universe. Dhananjaya, there is nothing superior to me. All things rest upon me, just like jewels strung upon a thread. So Janan, I think what Krishna tries to say in these verses describes what we learned earlier about the 2 types of knowledge that exist. Paravidya and Aparavidya. Aparavidya is the knowledge we gain through our senses, this physical world, and that is what Krishna is trying to say. Earth, water, fire, air, etc. These are the different elements that make up our material world. Krishna then goes on to say that there's an even more superior nature than these material elements. The force that exists in all creatures and maintains this universe. All life comes from these 2 sources. The material, like earth and fire, and the unperceivable, the Parabrahman. So this is similar to what you were saying, Janan. Being on this path of jnanam means to strive to have these experiences, to be able to understand what is around us, what is changing and is not changing. The Brahman that is beyond what we can perceive, he is not changing. What else did Krishna say about this topic, Janan?
Well, in the same chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, verses 8 to 11, Krishna gracefully goes on to say, I am the taste of the water and the light of the sun and the moon, O son of Kunti. I am the syllable Om found in all the Vedas. I am the sound in space, and I am the masculinity in man. I am the original scent of the earth. I am the luster of fire. I am the life of all creatures and the penances of the performers of austerities. O Partha, know that I am the original cause of all living beings. I am the wisdom of the wise, and I am the power of the powerful. I am the might of the mighty, which is devoid of passion and attachment. I am the desire to procreate, which does not violate the principles of Dharma. Krishna is describing this fascinating thought that he is the supreme embodiment of everything: life and death, darkness and light, good and evil, misery and bliss. These are not tangible, perceivable entities, but in addition to that, he describes himself as that which is also tangible and perceivable at the same time. When Krishna refers to himself as me, Krishna isn't necessarily describing his physical body that we idolize. He is describing who he genuinely is in entirety. That is, this all-pervasive, immortal energy. We must remember, at the end of the day, he is an avatar. Recently, Nayan, I studied about the incredible life of formidable 16th century Japanese lord Takeda Shingen, and he once stated, "Knowledge is not power. It is only potential. Applying that knowledge is power. Understanding why and when to apply that knowledge is wisdom." In reflecting on his thoughts, I understand that on this path of jnana, the ultimate goal of knowledge is only fulfilled by application with insightful experiences. We strive for experiences that allow us to truly know that we are also this all-pervasive Parabrahman ourselves.
Yeah, Jaden, I totally agree. I think the goal of this path is to strive to have the experiences of knowing this Parabrahman, like you were saying. In fact, Krishna talks even more about this in the Gita. He says, "My nature is eternal, supreme, and imperishable." Yet, less intelligent persons cannot comprehend this and consider me to be the impersonal that has now accepted a material form. I do not manifest myself to everyone. I am hidden by my Yogamaya potency, and thus the foolish cannot recognize me as eternal and unborn. So here Krishna says that he exists beyond the physical form, that he is the universe itself. And I believe that this is an important concept to grasp ourselves. We always need to keep in mind that throughout our life, apart from the physical world, there is a life force, the Parabrahman that exists. And on this path of Jnana Yoga, we should strive to experience this knowledge and at the very least, understand and take into account this concept, Janin.
Yeah, wonderfully explained, Nai. I believe that what you said is right. In order to truly understand ourselves, we must try to experience life beyond our physical form. Through experience, awareness, and knowledge, you'll reach the final destination of eternal divinity with the Parabrahman. This is why Krishna says in verse 26 and 28 of chapter 7 respectively, "O Arjuna, I know past, present, and future. I know all living beings, but they do not know me. Yet those that perform devout activities become purified of all reactions. They become free from the illusion of duality and worship me with dedication." Lord Krishna reveals that knowledge is only provided by the Parabrahman. Your interpretation of this philosophy may be different than your friend beside you, Nayan. However, there is no particular path that is right or wrong on this divine journey of self-realization. That is why Krishna tells us to perform reverential activities to free ourselves from duality. This principle of universality, the idea that we are all part of this eternal fabric, is the wisdom that cannot be destroyed. This truth will only come to fruition if we put it into practice. Swami formally stated, "Knowledge that is not put into practice is like food that is not digested."
I would like to share a touching experience from Swami's life that highlights his path of karma. Swami narrates his experience in Sathya Speaks, Volume 35, Discourse 17. In Swami's early school days, he had two close friends who adored him, Ramesh and Paresh. They were classmates and all the same age. After having beautiful experiences with the Lord, these youngsters developed such a sincere, intimate love for Swami. When Swami had left Urvakonda, Ramesh and Paresh could not bear the separation. After a short time of being away from Swami, they both passed away. They had surrendered themselves to Swami and prayed that they should never be separated from him. Ultimately, death could not separate them. When Swami came back to Puttaparthi, the same Ramesh and Paresh were born again as two puppies. And they were named Jack and Jill, and they were always with Swami. One day, the Queen of Mysore came to have Swami's darshan. She was described to be such a great devotee and such a highly disciplined woman. As there were no proper roads to Puttaparthi, she would ask the driver to stop the car at a nearby village, and she would walk the rest of the distance to the old mandir. The queen decided to rest for the night in the mandir. After having his dinner, the driver of the queen's vehicle returned to the village where his car was parked. Swami told Jack to accompany the driver and show him the way. Jack walked in front and the driver followed. Jack slept under the car, but the next morning, the driver started the car without realizing that Jack was sleeping under it. The wheel of the car ran over Jack and his backbone broke. Jack dragged himself across the river, wailing all the way. Someone came running to Swami saying, "Mr. Swami, Jack has met with an accident. He's coming crying in pain." Swami came out at once. Jack came close to Swami, weeping loudly. He fell at Swami's feet and breathed his last. He was buried behind the old mandir. As Jack had passed away, Jill stopped eating food and died after a few days. She was buried by the side of Jack. In this manner, Ramesh and Paresh did penance to be with Swami. Even after their death, they took birth as dogs to be with Swami. The lives of such devotees really show how they can carry out every action with purpose and dharma in mind. Jack followed the instructions of Swami without question. He performed actions per his role without any hesitation. In performing his required action, he was harmed, and what was his immediate reaction? Run back to Swami. For so many, when faced with difficulty, they often condemn God or regret their actions. They think something bad has happened as a result of their action. As we discussed, right actions involve giving up all sense of doership, which Jack did. It involves focusing on action itself and not the fruits of the action, which Jack did. And it also involves avoiding inaction, which Jack did. It's clear that Jack always acted with a sense of duty, and because of how he lived, he remained with Swami lifetime after lifetime.
I recall a time at school when I was eating lunch with my friends. There was another student who left his phone on the other side of the table, and I had left the cafeteria after eating his lunch. At that moment, I had a choice to either act or not act, leave the phone unattended or keep it safe. I held on to the phone because I knew he would come back to get it, and I wanted to make sure nobody else took it. He came back around an hour later looking for his phone, and I told him that he forgot it there, and I gave it to him. The reasons why I thought this was the right course of action was because if I put myself in his shoes, I would have wanted someone to protect my phone the way I protected his. These actions are aligned with our discussions about the path of karma. I acted with what I thought was the right intention, and I didn't expect anything in return, and I gave him his phone back. In Chapter 7 of Sandeha Navarani, page 57, number 32, Swami says, "Whatever you feel should not be done by others, avoid doing such to others." This, to me, beautifully highlights the path of karma.
Now, to be honest, I have not done a lot of seva, but I am trying to do more and more while I can. While I was on vacation in France, we went to a church and there were 2 homeless people there. The homeless people were sitting in the rain and they had been there for a couple of days. I know this because we went to the same church a few days in a row. When I saw them, I felt sad that they're experiencing a very different life than I was experiencing. I had thought to give them some money, but around the same time, my dad had given me some money and told me to give it to them. In reflecting on why I had done that action, I believe I did it because I was hoping to remove some of their suffering. I don't know to what extent this action would make an impact on them, but I feel like it was the right thing to do in the moment. We don't know what problems many people face in the world because we don't have those problems ourselves. This has given me insight into why helping someone can make a difference. We can only act with best intention in mind and play the role Swami has given us.
When talking about devotees that have progressed on the path of bhakti, there are so many devotees that may come to mind. Many bhaktas of Swami have progressed on the path with the intent of getting closer and closer to him.
There is one such devotee that we would like to discuss today. She comes to mind because she often goes unnoticed, and that is the case with sincere devotees on the path of bhakti.
Sai Gita, an exemplary devotee who is often inadequately described as Swami's pet elephant. In the year 2007, when Swami had visited the Institute auditorium, he had given a discourse where he made a very profound statement. Talking to the students, Swami had said, Sai Gita had attained a state of absolute focus and determination in her love and devotion to Swami. Swami continued saying, if anybody is able to think about, speak about, and develop that focused love for Swami, I myself will draw you closer to him.
So it's clear we're speaking about a true bhakta on the path of loving God more. There are so many beautiful experiences Sai Gita had with Swami. One mystifying ability of Sai Gita was that she was always aware of Swami's whereabouts and movements. Often when Swami would leave the ashram, Sai Gita would be at the front of her gate waiting to have Swami's darshan. She would wait with so much excitement. She wouldn't want to miss a moment with the Lord. A story worth mentioning is a time when Swami was in Parthi, and the students were in the Hillview Stadium grounds for their evening sports. Sai Gita would also do her daily walks around the grounds, and on one such day there was a sudden commotion that Swami was coming, even before anyone knew what was happening. Swami's car had already begun to enter the stadium, and at the time, Sai Gita was on the opposite side. The moment Sai Gita saw Swami's car, she began galloping as if she was a mare or a deer prancing. She was running so fast, and she was unmindful of her large body. The funny part is that Swami stopped the car, got out, and began running towards Sai Gita. It was described as a sight to see, and as they met to embrace each other, Swami began to pet and pacify her while hugging her and feeding her with fruits he had in the car. After spending a few moments with Sai Gita, Swami looked at the students and said, "Do you know why I kept Sai Gita right in front of your hostel? It is to show you what true devotion is. If you have even an ounce of love Sai Gita has for me, then your life would be sanctified."
Well said, Seon. There is another similar occasion when Swami was in front of the hostel, standing on the road with Sai Gita. And at times, Sai Gita would start urinating, overwhelmed with emotion and excitement. When that happened, Swami's robe would become very wet, but Swami would still pet Sai Gita. He would still stand with her, but there would still be a pool of urine under her feet, and students would hesitate to come closer to Swami. In such a moment, Swami looked at the boys and said, "If you drink a cup of urine of Sai Gita, maybe you can get some of the devotion she has." I think throughout Swami's entire life, there's never been a time where Swami has pointed to any devotee to describe their devotion and love the way Swami points out to Sai Gita.
Swami has spoken about the love and devotion of many devotees like Mother Ishwarama and Karnam Subhama, and would often speak about their last few moments. And Swami would say that if you had led a life of nobility, it would show in the way you bid farewell to this world.
Yeah, there's never been a time where Swami had attended and given instruction for the funeral rites of a devotee. But with Sai Gita, Swami had sent Payasam after she had passed away to be placed in her mouth. Swami came in the morning to see the funeral proceedings. Swami placed vibhuti on her body. Swami personally inspected what was going into her burial pit. Swami used to keep Sai Gita's jewelry in his own room. He told the caretaker to keep all the jewels with Sai Gita in the burial pit, and Swami completed overseeing her funeral rites.
You know, when we think of the way love is shown and received, it's really easy to understand if it's person to person. We can tell someone we love them, and then they can reciprocate in words or in actions. And then that relationship can continue to grow and flourish. Imagining the way Sai Gita would have communicated her love for Swami and Swami to her is almost unfathomable. There would have been so many factors that limit their ability to share their love, but somehow Swami himself described it as a love of a true devotee. In a discourse to students, Swami had described his love for Sai Gita as the pure, boundless love that a mother has for her children. Sai Gita had come to Swami as a 10-day-old baby. She was an orphan baby that Swami had cared for with so much love that she forgot about her own mother.
Sai Gita in her early days was said to have done pradakshina of Swami's residence when her enclosure was near Swami. Devotees would line up behind Sai Gita to perform their morning offerings. Such was her blessing to be so near and dear to Swami. The question I think we all need to ask is, what do we do with this love? We receive this love from Swami, and what is to be done with it? Or rather, what do we do to ourselves to ensure this love is preserved? The conclusion we can make is that the love we receive from God should make us feel detached from this Maya. This love should be transformed into our detachment. In looking at Sai Gita's life, we can see she has done this. And that is why Swami says her love is an example we can all look up to.
At this time, we would like to show you all a video that beautifully captures the sweet relationship of Swami and Sai Gita, and we hope that it serves as an inspiration to those of you on this path of bhakti.
సత్య సాయి భగవానుని ముద్దు బిడ్డవమ్మా సత్య సాయి భగవానుని ముద్దు బిడ్డవమ్మా నీ నిర్మల భక్తికి సాటి లేదమ్మా నీ నిర్మల భక్తికి సాటి లేదమ్మా సాయి గీతమ్మా సత్య సాయి భగవానుని ముద్దు బిడ్డవమ్మా అడవిలో పుట్టావు అమ్మను కోల్పోయావు అడవిలో పుట్టావు అమ్మను కోల్పోయావు అమ్మా అమ్మా అంటూ ఎలుగెత్తి పిలిచావు గుండె కరిగి పట్టి సాయి అడిగి చేర్చుకున్నాడు కన్న బిడ్డలా సాకి తల్లి ప్రేమ పంచాడు సత్య సాయి భగవానుని ముద్దు బిడ్డవమ్మా కృతయుగాన హరిగాచిన గజరాజువు నీవు శ్రీకాళహస్తిలోన శివుని భక్తురాలివో ఏ పూర్వ పుణ్యమో స్వామి దరికి చేరావు ఏ జన్మ బంధమో స్వామి మనసు దోచావు సత్య సాయి భగవానుని ముద్దు బిడ్డవమ్మా నీ చిలిపి చేతలతో సాయిని అలరించా నీ చిలిపి చేతలతో సాయిని అలరించా స్వామి కురులు ముదాడి ప్రేమ పంచి ఇచ్చా స్వామి కురులు ముదాడి ప్రేమ పంచి ఇచ్చా సత్య సాయి భగవానుని భక్తితో కొలిచావు సత్య సాయి భగవానుని భక్తితో కొలిచావు స్వామి క్షణం మరుగైతే కన్నీరు నింపావు సత్య సాయి భగవానుని ముద్దు బిడ్డవమ్మా సత్య సాయి వైభవం కనులార చూసావు సత్య సాయి వైభవం కనులార చూసావు ఆ వైభవ దీప్తిలో జీవిని చిందించావు దైవం మదిలో నిలిచిన భక్తురాలివమ్మా సాయి నామమున్న వరకు చిరంజీవివమ్మా సాయి నామమున్న వరకు చిరంజీవివమ్మా సత్య సాయి భగవానుని ముద్దు బిడ్డవమ్మా సత్య సాయి భగవానుని ముద్దు బిడ్డవమ్మా
It's so inspiring seeing that type of love for Swami from Sai Gita. I would like to share my own experience of seeing his hand in my life. Swami has been a part of my life ever since I was young, so my love and devotion grew for him from a very young age. Swami plays a countless number of roles in my life, so I can't really explain my relationship with him. At times, he's my mother, father, friend, companion, hope, and even God. When I was young, I would ask Swami to give me this and give me that. I was always under the impression that Swami would give me whatever I want, But as I grew up, I began to realize that giving and receiving shouldn't be the connection you have with someone you love. The mutual love and affection you have for that person is what makes the relationship strong. As a devotee of Swami, my offering for him usually came in the form of singing bhajans and chanting the Gayatri Mantra. I believed this to be the way for me to send my love to him. I recall an incident where a close family member of mine was very ill. The doctor said his chances of survival were very minimal. I didn't want to ask Swami to cure him and make him better. I trusted Swami with his life. I thought to myself, he will be better, Swami, rather than will he become better, Swami? In the end, my family member did survive. And was it by Swami's grace? I would say yes. And even if Swami hadn't really given me what I wanted, I would know that he had given me the courage to face the loss. Ultimately, regardless of the outcome, I would like to believe that whatever happened, I would accept as his prasadam. This to me is bhakti.
When describing Swami as an avatar, we consider him a manifested form of God, which means he is the embodiment of Parabrahman itself.
So when knowing Swami, we have the experience of knowing this Parabrahman.
We want to have experiences of knowing the truth, but that sounds quite difficult to do.
Let's hear in Swami's words the truth about his reality.
Chukalaniyu Brahma Suryundu oka Brahma Chukalaniyu Brahma Suryundu oka Brahma Chandrudananu Brahma Jalamu Brahma Swargamananu Brahma Vaikunthamadi Brahma Talliyu Brahmaye Tandri Brahma Bhagyambadi Brahma Valakyamadi Brahma Jeevinchutadi Brahma Jeevi Brahma Puttinchunadi Brahma Poshinchunadi Brahma Puttinchunadi Brahma Poshinchunadi Brahma Gittinchunadi Brahma Gruhini Brahma Kalamantayu Brahma Karambu Brahma Prakrutiyantayu Brahma Mana Prema Brahma Sarvamunu Brahma Ee Sabhayu Brahma Satyamunu Telpunatti Ee Sai Brahma ఇంతకంటను వేరెత్తి ఎరుగపరతు సాధు సద్గుణగణ్యులవు సభ్యులారా సాధు సద్గుణగణ్యులవు సభ్యులారా
What a beautiful description. I think observing Swami's life can show us how we should live our own life.
You know what, Tushar? When new devotees used to come to Swami, Swami would often tell them that they have the permission to test him.
Exactly. He would say, test me first, and then accept me. So through reasoning and rationalizing his own experiences, devotees would begin to develop faith.
Nicely put, Tushar. I think after accepting Swami as the embodiment of the Parabrahman, a person can observe his life with this thought. If everything we see and cannot see, and everything we perceive and cannot perceive is this Parabrahman, I too am this Parabrahman, and observing Swami's life can show me how to live as the embodiment of divinity.
Absolutely. It's easy to describe Swami as the embodiment of divinity when we have observed his life.
Thinking about Swami as the embodiment of this Parabrahman, I'm reminded of a short story narrated by an old student of Swami. One day, they were all sitting for darshan. It was a very rainy day, and in those days, Kulwant Hall did not have a roof. It was all sand around the mandir, and when it started pouring rain, all these devotees would go out and sit under the small arches that used to be around the compound wall. That day, Swami came out and began talking to the boys. He said, "See these devotees? I tell them, but they don't listen to me." Pretty much implying that the devotees don't understand Swami's true reality. And suddenly, there was a mischievous twinkle in Swami's eyes. Swami said, "Boys, are you ready to see something fun?" So immediately, all the backs sat up straight and everyone turned to Swami's direction. Swami said, "I'm going to go out to give darshan now. The moment I step off this platform, the rain will stop. And then I'll go out to give darshan to everyone, and then come back. And the moment I step back on this platform, it will begin to start raining again." And then Swami went on to say, "Okay, are you all ready? Are you ready to see?" And everyone responded saying, "Yes, Swami, yes, Swami." Ever so gently, almost as if in slow motion, Swami put out one of his legs. The moment he stepped out, as if someone had just turned off a tap, the rain stopped. Swami went out for darshan and went very slowly, taking almost half an hour. And when Swami came back, after taking a complete round, and was near the platform where students were sitting, he looked at the boys and said, "Boys, ready?" And then immediately, everyone remembered, "Oh right, Swami said that it would stop raining again." And then, as though Swami just jumped onto the platform area, the moment he near jumped onto it, as though someone had started a shower, it started raining again. And then Swami said, "See? See?"
Beautiful story. Here we can see how Swami has control over the natural world, composed of the 5 elements. What else can we say about his reality? Other than he is the embodiment of ultimate truth, the embodiment of absolute divinity, and the embodiment of love.
It's so important that we use Swami's life for our own benefit. We must study and observe it to understand how to live, and how to be true to our true nature. If everything perceivable and not is this Parabrahman, then having the experience of true knowing seems possible if we can live how Swami lived.
Let's all set a goal for ourselves to develop and promote one quality we have observed in Swami that we can bring out in ourselves.
Let's all ensure that we stick to it and make sure we are true to growing good qualities, godly qualities within ourselves.
Since infancy, I began to attain knowledge of the world simply by being able to talk, walk, and learn about the society around me, as well as learn academically.
As I continue to follow this journey of understanding myself, I desire to have experiences of knowledge that exist beyond my senses. A moment in my life where I tried to connect to this concept of universal godliness was a couple months ago in May. Me and my family were going to drive to Lake Shore. Just as we began driving, I was saying a sentence and slurred one of my words, so both my siblings began to continuously tease me for the rest of the drive, which was unusual because they don't usually tease me for that long. After a while, I began to get aggravated. However, I handled this moment a lot differently than I usually would have. I began to take a moment before responding to think about what may be the root cause of them teasing me for such a long time. Then it occurred to me that they mentioned how they were having rough days, which made me sympathize for both of them. As opposed to retaliating, which would have been my usual response, I took a deep breath, rationalized, and assessed why they were teasing me, as opposed to dwelling on the mere fact that they teased me. As a result, I did not cater to my impulses, but instead I opened up to both of them and asked them what's on their mind. I feel as if this experience was a way for me to reflect and align myself to this higher understanding. Since I am only 17 years old, I hope that beyond achieving this first step of jnana, I strive to continue on this path.
We've seen how jnana, bhakti, and karma have played a part in our lives. But now we'd like to provide you all with some ways you can embark down these paths.
Exactly, Nanda. To what extent can we provide practical tools to progress on such a path? Because understanding these margams in theory is great, but the benefit lies in practical experience.
For a person who follows this path, the goal is to have an experience of transcendental knowledge. The knowledge which is beyond our senses and the perceivable world, also known as paravidya. But how do you get these experiences?
I wish I could snap my fingers, Nanda, so that both of us have this experience of transcendental knowing. But most of the time, it's not as easy as that.
Interestingly, we can make it as easy as that for ourselves. We observe many people who have had the chance to experience this truth with what seems to be minimal to little effort. We can consider this to be God's grace, or punya. But it can also be the accumulation of good deeds done in this lifetime or in others.
But how are we defining good? Because being good is different to different people. For example, a Christian would define good differently than a Muslim. Indians would define good differently than Canadians. So we all have different definitions around what does it mean to be good.
You're right, goodness is definitely subjective. But I think there are some things that go beyond these divisions. And that is what we describe as a fundamental good. Something that most, if not all people would agree on. For example, I would think that harming another person is not good. And I think that most people would agree with me on that. So I think it's our job to find that fundamental good. Luckily, we have many resources around us that can help us.
Exactly, Nanda. In our case, as Sai devotees, we have Swami's discourses and instructions. There's also the Gita that was brought up today. There's Vedam and other literature, and a series of other sources we can look to when trying to lead a good life. The funny thing is we're expected to follow this concept of good hoping it will lead to an experience of true knowing.
In order to get that understanding, we should redefine the way we think. The path of jnana often involves questioning and reasoning to understand why we think the way we think. We ask ourselves, who am I? To understand who is the I that I am identifying with. This may be easier to understand with an example. If I asked you what this is, what would you say?
It's a water bottle.
But what if I told you it's a candy bar?
I wouldn't believe you.
Why is that?
I have been told by many people throughout my life that this is a water bottle.
Exactly. You've had experiences and impressions that have reinforced your belief that this is a water bottle. But now think about a young child only exposed to their immediate family. Imagine your dad walking into the house one day, seeing this on the table and asking, "Who put this candy bar there?" And then your mom walks in. She sees it on the table and she says, "That's a nice candy bar on our table." And then your grandma walks in. She picks it up and hands it to you and she says, "Do you want this candy bar?" Now you've had 3 people who you trust tell you that this is a candy bar. That's 3 experiences where you've identified this item as a candy bar, and none that have told you otherwise. So to you, there's no doubt that this is a candy bar. But now imagine going to school, and on the first day of class, your teacher asks everyone to take their water bottles off their table. You do nothing, because to you, this isn't a water bottle. So your teacher asks you again, and again you do nothing. So now your teacher comes to your desk and puts it on the ground for you. You've just had your first experience where this item is not identified as a candy bar. Then the person sitting next to you asks why you didn't put it on the floor the first 2 times. And that's your second experience where your understanding is questioned. And as days go on, you see that everyone in your class identifies this as a water bottle. So you've had 3 experiences at home where this is identified as a candy bar, and many experiences after that where it's identified as a water bottle. And in the end, using your power of discrimination, you come to the conclusion that this is a water bottle. We can see here that the way we identify with something is largely based on our circumstances and experiences. That is why a Hindu identifies as a Hindu, a Muslim as a Muslim, or a Christian as a Christian. But we take apart and question these external constructs and influences on our life. We ask ourselves, who is the I that I am identifying with? Asking these types of questions and refining our method of thinking is how we progress on the path of jnana. The knowing and identification of this I as part of the Parabrahman is jnana. To have such experiences, we can only act and lead our lives in a way which we think will bring us what we are seeking. In our case, at a very fundamental or basic level, that involves us doing good, putting in maximum effort, and using our power of discrimination and questioning to reason with the I that I am identifying with. Swami says, yes, I am God, and so are you. The only difference between you and I is that while I am aware of this fact, you are not.
It's important to understand how we can progress on the path of bhakti and how to stay on the path of bhakti, because life can have its ups and downs, and maintaining bhakti throughout could be a challenge for many people.
Exactly, Pranav. I think along the lines of Bhakti Yoga, we must first think about what it means to be a Bhakta. Bhaktas amount everything in their life to God, so every action and thought in their brain regarding any event is about God. It's definitely easier said than done, because we think about so many different things. So I think the first thing to do is to clear your head of different thoughts and then to examine your reactions to your actions around certain events in your life so that you can instead see them as God's divine hand in your life.
Seeing the hand of God in our life can definitely be a challenge at times, and that's why it can be important to look to devotees who you consider to be more developed on the path of bhakti than you are. Kind of like how you would for any skill, actually. An example could be if you were trying to learn a language. If you wanted to improve your skills in the language, the best strategy is widely considered to be immersion. Making sure you eat, sleep, and breathe anything that relates to what you are trying to improve upon. Of course, you would also need a teacher, someone who is more advanced than you and who you could learn from and could accelerate your progress on the path. This is exactly the case for bhakti. Immersing yourself in an environment where you can best learn about it and looking to someone more advanced than you will help to accelerate your progress on this path.
Nicely put, Pranav. There's a beautiful verse by a poet saint who says in his dialogue with the Lord, "Dear Lord, I'm able to think of you because you have chosen to enter my consciousness. If you had not chosen to enter my mind, I could not have thought of you." So to even think about the Lord for just a moment can only be possible with the grace of the Lord. Reviewing and reflecting on God's life the devotees within this life, is beneficial for us because it teaches us how to live our own lives. Swami says stories of devotees are just as much stories of God, and I think the value of reading such stories lies in our ability to observe these devotees and attempt to live a life similar to them, or at least practice those things that help them get closer to God. We often learn by observation, so seeing the good they can do can help us do good ourselves.
Not just reading, but things like bhajans, meditation, recitation, reviewing our scriptures, and performing certain religious practices have been described as practices that help us get closer to God. These are meant to get people to think about God, and therefore strengthen their faith through immersion, like I had mentioned earlier. However, there are some reasons that these might not be the best methods for everyone, right, Ishan?
Exactly. And speaking of things like meditation, recitation, we as Swami devotees are always doing these things. But are we really thinking about why we're doing these things and what it means to do these things? Are we really having a conversation with God, or are we doing these things just for the sake of doing them? We need to start focusing more on the intent of why we do things, rather than just doing them for the sake of doing them, because the intent is what matters the most.
I think we should really try to understand that bhakti is a subjective experience, and we should really just worry about our relationship with Swami. Our goal should always be in a place where we can connect with God, and that way we can always cultivate our relationship with Him. Once, a devotee posed a question to a sage who lived in the Himalayas. This devotee said, "There are so many people who go into raptures of ecstasy when just saying the name of the Lord. When Mirabai said Krishna, she was in absolute bliss. When Tyagaraja said Rama, he was in absolute bliss. So why is it then that the Lord's name doesn't send me into states of extreme bliss when I chant the Lord's name? Why don't I get such bliss?" And to this, the master said, "Unfortunately, in certain circumstances, a tongue afflicted by disease, infection, and illness often experiences a loss of taste. And so even if you put the sweetest thing on the tongue, it may taste bitter or have no taste at all. In such a case, the fault is not with the sweet, but with the tongue." Hearing this, the devotee did not leave. He instead said, "Then, Master, give me the medicine. Give me the medicine so that my tongue also becomes disease-free, because I also want to be able to enjoy the sweetness of the Lord's name." And that is when the Master said, "My dear child, the beauty of the Lord's name is that it in itself is the medicine. Just keep taking it. Keep taking the Lord's name over and over again as your medicine, and a day will come when you are cured. A day will come when you enjoy this sweetness, a sweetness unlike any other, a sweetness that Mirabai was even ready to drink poison for. Imagine if all of us could get to such a state."
Yeah, I really agree with what you said about being in a place where you always connect with God, because it's really your intention that matters when experiencing God, and it might seem intimidating starting on this path, but it's something you should just keep at the back of your mind, because it's really the journey you should focus on instead of the end goal.
Hopefully, this gives everyone some clarity on how to further progress on the path of bhakti.
Similar to what my brothers have said about Karma Margam, I would like to end on how you can follow this path. The easiest way to follow Karma Margam is just to observe your own thoughts. We've talked about giving up the fruits of action, giving up all sense of doership, and avoiding inaction. But the most important thing about Karma Margam is following your idea of Dharma, which is your sense of duty. Because in all honesty, it's really easy to just forget about what your Dharma is and try to lie to yourself and say, "This is my Dharma, that's why I'm doing it." For example, in the Mahabharata, Duryodhana's jealousy of the Pandavas was so great that he fooled himself into thinking that it was his Dharma as a king to take over kingdoms and expand his empire, and so he took over Hastinapur. What Duryodhana didn't realize is that there is a hierarchy of Dharma. So we have to be able to differentiate between these different kinds of Dharmas. And since we can never stop action in the Karma Margam as long as we exist, what we should be doing is reflecting on our actions to ensure that they're aligned with our concept of good, our concept of our role in life. Karma Margam is a practice that ties you from birth to rebirth. And the goal of Karma Margam is to enhance your life while enhancing the lives of others. Your karma must follow your dharma. You should work following your conscience. Swami says, duty is God. Work is worship.
ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా, నా పిల్లల యొక్క పరిస్థితి నాకు తెలుసు, కానీ మరొకరు తెలియదు. నేనెప్పుడు మీ వెంటనే జంటనే ఇంటనే ఉంటుంటాను. భగవాన్ is always with you, in you, around you, above you. మీరందరూ కూడా ఐకమత్యంతో పని చేయండి. Work with a feeling of unity. నా సీట్ ఇక్కడ కాదు. Bhagawan's seat is not here. నా సీట్ మీ యొక్క హృదయమే. Bhagawan's chair is your heart. కనుకనే మీరు ఎక్కడ ఉంటే అక్కడ కూడా స్వామి ఉంటున్నాడు. Swami is there wherever you are. ఏ కొరతలు మీకు జరగవు. Nothing will happen to you. ఏ విధమైనటువంటి అపజయాలు మీకు జరగవు. You will never have failure. కానీ పరిపూర్ణమైన విశ్వాసంతో మీరు పనిలో ప్రారంభించండి. Work with the total faith. ఏ పని చేసినా కూడా ఇది భగవత్ కార్యంగా భావించండి. Whatever you may do, good work, take it as God's work.
Thank you, brothers, for taking us through the journey of understanding these three margams. We can see that these three components are important in any activity that we do.
For instance, singing bhajan is considered an activity part of Bhakti Yoga. However, while singing a bhajan, it's important that we get the tune and the beat correctly, and follow the correct discipline of singing as well, which is Karma Yoga.
It is also important to get the feeling right, that love for God, without which the bhajan is useless, and that is Bhakti Yoga.
Finally, we need to experience the meaning of the bhajan that's being sung, so that we can feel complete, and that is Jnana Yoga.
Imagine a three-wheeled vehicle like a tricycle or a rickshaw. Each of the three wheels are important because without one, the vehicle will topple over. However, based on individual choice and preference, one may either fix karma, bhakti, or jnana as the front wheel, but the other two wheels have to be there as well.
And so, let's all start our journey towards God with all three, karma, bhakti, and jnana. Let's not say I'm doing seva, so I won't do bhajans, or that I'm doing bhajan, so I won't read Swami's literature. No, all three are very, very, very important, because they are the same. Think of Swami, and start your journey down this three-layered path to God.
Saishwaraya Vitmahe Sathya Devaya Dhimahi Tanna Sarva Prachodayat. We know this Sai is Supreme Divinity incarnate. We meditate on this God of truth. May the Almighty lead us on the path of total liberation.
Thank you all for inviting us into your homes.
Thank you all for listening to our presentation.
And happy birthday, Swami.
Sairam.
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 ప్రేమ స్వరూపులారా, హ్యాపీ 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 బీ హ్యాపీ, హ్యాపీ హ్యాపీ మేక్ అదర్స్ హ్యాపీ, ఆల్ విల్ బి హ్యాపీ, గాడ్ విల్ బి హ్యాపీ.
సాయేశ్వరాయ విద్మహే సత్యదేవాయ ధీమహి తన్నః సర్వ ప్రచోదయాత్. సాయేశ్వరాయ విద్మహే సత్యదేవాయ ధీమహి తన్నః సర్వ ప్రచోదయాత్.
offering my loving pranams to Swami's lotus feet. Respected elders, youth, and students, Om Shri Sai Ram. This year, the theme of Swami's 95th birthday celebrations is My Story is His Story, a theme that allows our SSE students to reflect upon, understand, and study Swami's life in a way that hopefully gives them utility and value. Swami's given us divine instructions on how to lead a fulfilling life, and our job is to study those instructions and implement them into our lives in a way that hopefully makes us a little bit better than who we were yesterday. This was the goal of presenting this theme of My Story is His Story through the lens of our SSE students. We hope you find value in reflecting upon the presentations you've seen this weekend. We started the month of November with the Akhanda Bhajans, and we had our Ladies' Day celebrations a few days ago. And now we're at this weekend of SSE gratitude offerings, and all these programs culminate with Swami's 95th birthday celebrations tomorrow, starting at 6 a.m. The center has organized a full day of online programs, and if you need any information, you can always check the center bulletin. To conclude, in planning and organizing this weekend of events for our SSE students, through our SSE students, and by our SSE students, we'd like to thank all the gurus, our SSE coordination team, our young adults, the birthday committee, our parents, and more than anyone else, the SSE students, our loving, loving, loving SSE students who put in so much hard work to ensure that this weekend turned out the way that it did. Ultimately, it is Swami who speaks and Swami who listens. And on Swami's birthday, we wish you all nothing but the best. Om Shri Sai Ram.